The galaxy had long forgotten Earth's place in the annals of warfare. Among the stars, humanity was a relic, an afterthought in discussions of combat prowess. Alien civilizations, far more advanced and seemingly invincible, boasted of their military conquests, their fleets of warships, and their soldiers clad in impenetrable armor. In their minds, Earth was a quaint, backward world, capable of little more than the primitive skirmishes of old. And so, in the halls of the Galactic Council, amidst the towering figures of alien generals and commanders, humanity's fighting skills were nothing but a joke. The Galactic Council, a grand assembly of the universe's most powerful species, had convened to discuss recent developments in interstellar peacekeeping. It had become a tradition among the more arrogant races to mock those they saw as beneath them, and no race bore the brunt of these jeers more than humanity. Today, however, the ridicule had reached new heights. General Archer of the K'Artor, a towering, reptilian figure with a battle-scarred face, stood before the council, smirking as he recounted tales of Earth's glorious history of warfare. Primitive, so utterly primitive, Archer declared, his voice dripping with condescension. Humans, with their metal bullets and simple machines, barely understand the concept of real war. They fight like beasts, relying on their brute instincts. In any true test of skill, they'd fall before our warriors without so much as raising a defense. Laughter echoed through the council chambers, with various alien leaders nodding in agreement. They had seen the reports of Earth's past conflicts, wars fought on their own soil, with limited technology and strategy that, in their eyes, bordered on absurd. To the galactic elite, humans were just a relic of a violent history, completely unprepared for the sophisticated warfare of the stars. But Earth was not without its defenders. Seated in the back of the council hall was Captain Tark al-Karim, an unassuming man in military fatigues, his eyes focused, listening carefully. He had been sent as Earth's representative, tasked with ensuring that the Galactic Council understood humanity's position in this vast universe. His silence was intentional. He was waiting for the right moment. And that moment came when the Council proposed a war game, a tournament of sorts to settle interstellar disputes. Earth, of course, would be one of the participating planets. General Archer turned to face Captain Tark, a sneer on his lips. "I'm sure you won't mind if we include Earth in this little exercise," he said mockingly. "Your people could use the experience, after all. Perhaps we'll learn just how strong your so-called warriors are." Tark met Archer's gaze, calm but resolute. He knew the type: alien generals who thought technology and strength were the only things that mattered on a battlefield. They had never seen what true survival looked like. The Galactic Council waited for his response, fully expecting a decline, or worse, an excuse. But Tark stood, his voice firm, unshaken by the laughter and jeers. "Earth will participate," Tark said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "But not on your terms." The room quieted, the mood shifting as the alien leaders exchanged curious glances. Archer's smile faltered slightly. "You mock our ways because you don't understand them," Tark continued. "But war is not about brute strength or the most advanced weapons. It's about survival, adaptation, and using every resource at your disposal. If you truly want to see what Earth is capable of, then let's test our mettle in a place we know well. A place where your technology, your armor, and your arrogance mean nothing." Archer raised an eyebrow, intrigued but unimpressed. "And where, exactly, would this place be?" "The desert." Silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The desert was a terrain that many alien civilizations considered inhospitable, barren, devoid of resources, and impossible to traverse with ease. But for humans, the desert was a different story entirely. Tark knew what the Council didn't. He knew of Earth's warriors who had been forged in the scorching heat, the unrelenting winds, and the shifting sands of deserts that spanned continents. These warriors were not just soldiers. They were survivors, experts in guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and combat in one of the harshest environments known to man. And while the galaxy might have forgotten them, Earth's deserts had never stopped producing some of the toughest fighters in the universe. "You propose that we fight, in sand?" Archer scoffed. "This is the extent of your so-called strategy?" Tark didn't flinch. You wanted a challenge. I'm offering you one. We'll fight in the desert, with minimal technology. No energy shields, no advanced weaponry. Just soldiers. Flesh and blood against the elements. Let's see how well your warriors fare when they can't rely on their machines. The council murmured in response, unsure of how to react. This was not what they had expected. General Archer's expression hardened, his pride wounded by the audacity of the challenge. But he would not back down. After all, how hard could it be? A few days in the sand, and they'd wipe out Earth's forces without even breaking a sweat? Very well, Archer said, his voice cold. We accept your terms, human. But don't expect mercy. Your warriors will fall, just like all the others. Tark only nodded, his mind already preparing for the battle ahead. The Galactic Council dismissed the meeting, and the alien leaders departed, still chuckling to themselves. They had no idea what awaited them. They had never faced Earth's desert warriors. As Tark left the council chambers, he tapped a small communicator on his wrist. Send the signal, he said quietly. We're going to need the best. In the deserts of Earth, a message was received. The world's deserts were unforgiving, unyielding landscapes, places where only the toughest survived. From ancient times, they had forged warriors who learned to live off minimal resources, endure extreme conditions, and outwit opponents far more powerful than themselves. These deserts had become Earth's natural training grounds, and over centuries, the humans who thrived there had developed a unique approach to warfare. While the galactic powers relied on advanced technology, Earth's desert warriors relied on adaptability, cunning, and an intimate knowledge of the harsh environment. Captain Tark Al-Karim was a product of that legacy. Born and raised in the desert, he had been trained from a young age in the art of survival. His ancestors had fought in some of the greatest desert campaigns in history, from ancient battles to modern conflicts. Tark carried that history within him, but what set him apart was his ability to blend old traditions with new techniques. He led his troops with a deep understanding of both the human mind and the land they fought on. As the preparations began for the Galactic Tournament, Tark handpicked a team of elite warriors. Each one had been trained in the deserts of Earth, honing their skills in some of the planet's most extreme conditions. These soldiers were not just experts in combat, they were masters of psychological warfare, deception, and ambush tactics. They knew how to use the environment to their advantage, making the desert itself a weapon against their enemies. Tark had no illusions about the task ahead. The alien forces they would face were formidable, each with its own strengths and combat experience. But he also knew that the desert would level the playing field. Alien technology, as advanced as it was, could not change the nature of the terrain. The sand would clog their machines, the heat would drain their energy, and the endless dunes would disorient them. These alien warriors, for all their arrogance, had never fought in an environment like this. They were used to controlled, predictable battles, scenarios where technology solved every problem. The desert would be an entirely different challenge. The day of the first battle arrived. The alien forces, led by General Archer, landed in the heart of Earth's largest desert. As their ships touched down, they marveled at the vastness of the sands stretching endlessly before them. To them, it seemed like an empty, lifeless wasteland, one they would conquer with ease. But they were wrong. As soon as they disembarked, the first problem arose. The intense heat hit them immediately, far beyond anything they had experienced on their home worlds. Their armor, designed to withstand the cold of space or the controlled climates of their own planets, began to overheat. Sweat poured down their faces as they struggled to adjust to the searing temperature. They tried activating their cooling systems, but the sand quickly interfered, clogging vents and rendering their technology ineffective. For the first time, doubt flickered in their minds. This was not what they had expected. Tark's desert warriors were already watching, hidden among the dunes. They had spent days preparing the battlefield, setting traps and positioning themselves for maximum advantage. They knew the terrain like the back of their hands, and they moved through it with the precision of hunters stalking their prey. The alien forces were unwittingly walking into a carefully crafted web. The first strike came swiftly. A small alien patrol, sent to scout the area, suddenly found itself surrounded. The desert warriors attacked with speed and precision, striking from the cover of the dunes and disappearing just as quickly. The aliens, disoriented and confused, fired wildly into the sand, but their shots hit nothing. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. The patrol had been wiped out without a single human casualty. Panic began to spread among the alien ranks. They had never encountered an enemy who could disappear so completely into the landscape. Every time they thought they had the humans cornered, the desert warriors would vanish, only to strike again from a different direction. It was as if the desert itself was attacking them. General Archer, watching from the command center, could barely believe what he was seeing. His troops were among the best in the galaxy, yet they were being outmaneuvered by what he had thought were primitive humans. He barked orders, sending more troops to the front lines, but the result was the same. The desert had become the humans' ally, and his forces were falling apart. What Archer failed to understand was that this was only the beginning. Tark and his warriors had barely begun to use the full extent of their strategies. The aliens were growing more desperate by the minute, burning through their supplies of water and energy far faster than expected. Their equipment, once seen as invincible, was now little more than dead weight, dragging them down in the shifting sands. The psychological toll was immense. The alien soldiers, once so confident in their superior firepower, were now consumed by fear. They saw enemies in every shadow, heard footsteps in the wind, and felt the crushing weight of the desert's isolation. The desert wasn't just a battlefield, it was a living, breathing entity, and it was on the humans' side. As the day wore on, the temperature rose even higher. The alien forces, weakened by dehydration and exhaustion, began to falter. Meanwhile, the desert warriors remained calm, conserving their energy and moving with purpose. They had trained for this their entire lives. The desert was their home, and they knew how to survive when others would perish. Tark, observing the battlefield from a vantage point, gave the order for the next phase of the attack. His warriors moved in unison, striking at key points in the alien formations. They targeted supply lines, disabled equipment, and sowed confusion among the enemy ranks. Every strike was calculated, every move designed to maximize damage while minimizing risk. By the end of the day, the alien forces were in complete disarray. They had lost countless soldiers, and their remaining troops were demoralized and exhausted. General Archer, once so confident, now faced the harsh reality of the situation. His forces, for all their advanced technology and training, were no match for Earth's desert warriors. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert, Tark knew the battle was far from over. But the first day had been a success. The aliens had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. The desert had claimed its first victims, and soon, it would claim many more. The second day began much as the first, with the sun rising over the endless dunes, casting harsh light across the landscape. But by now, the alien forces were already showing signs of wear. General Archer's troops, once proud and sure of their dominance, had become haggard and cautious, their confidence shaken by the relentless attacks from an enemy they couldn't see. Their advanced armor now felt like a burden in the desert heat, and their high-tech weapons seemed to be failing them in the face of this terrain that cared nothing for technology. In stark contrast, the desert warriors moved with fluid precision, invisible until the moment they struck. They never lingered in one place, constantly shifting positions, taking advantage of the natural cover the desert provided. Sandstorms became their allies, concealing their movements, while the heat, oppressive to the alien forces, was just another part of their world, one they had learned to endure and even thrive in. It was not just their bodies that were hardened by the desert, but their minds. The desert warriors knew how to fight patiently, how to wait for the exact right moment to strike, and that patience was beginning to pay off. The alien soldiers grew more desperate with each passing hour. The vast resources they had once counted on were dwindling fast. Their water supplies, so easily taken for granted on other planets, were running out, and their cooling systems were overloaded. Every step became a struggle, and every gust of wind threatened to bury them in sand. Their leaders, unable to comprehend the simplicity of the situation, continued to rely on tactical maps and predictive algorithms that made no sense in this environment. They did not understand that the desert was not something that could be controlled or conquered. Tark had anticipated this. He knew that once the aliens realized their technology couldn't save them, panic would set in. He also knew that panic could be weaponized. His orders to his warriors were simple: keep the pressure on. No large-scale engagements yet, just enough strikes to keep the alien forces guessing, to exhaust them further, to erode their will to fight. It was a slow, grinding tactic, but one that would inevitably lead to victory. The alien command structure, so efficient on paper, was beginning to crumble. Communications were breaking down as sand clogged their systems and drained their power. The few messages that did get through were full of confusion and desperation. Their commanders, isolated from the front lines by their reliance on faulty tech, were growing more and more detached from the reality their troops were facing. General Archer himself was beginning to realize just how badly he had underestimated his human opponents. Despite this, Archer was not yet ready to admit defeat. He ordered an all-out assault, believing that if his forces could just locate and engage the desert warriors in a direct confrontation, they could turn the tide of the battle. It was a decision made out of frustration rather than strategic thinking, and Tark saw it for the mistake that it was. He instructed his warriors to fall back slightly, giving the aliens the illusion that they were gaining ground. The alien forces moved forward, pushing deeper into the desert, further from their supplies, further from safety. And then, just when the aliens thought they had their prey cornered, the trap was sprung. The desert warriors, now hidden even deeper in the dunes, launched a coordinated ambush. They struck from all sides, attacking with the precision of hunters. Their weapons, simple by comparison to the aliens' advanced arsenal, were devastatingly effective in this environment. The sand muffled the sounds of their movements, and by the time the alien soldiers realized what was happening, it was already too late. The alien forces, already weakened by dehydration and exhaustion, began to collapse. Soldiers broke rank, scattering in different directions, but the desert had no mercy for those who tried to flee. The sand was everywhere, in their eyes, their mouths, their equipment, slowing their movements and sapping their strength. The desert warriors pursued them with relentless efficiency, never giving the aliens a moment to regroup or recover. General Archer, watching from a distance, was furious. His forces were being decimated, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Every time he thought he had a grasp on the situation, the humans slipped through his fingers like the very sand they fought on. His rage only deepened when he realized that this entire time, the desert warriors had been controlling the pace of the battle, luring his troops further and further into the desert until they were too far gone to be saved. In one final, desperate attempt to regain control, Archer ordered an aerial bombardment of the desert. He believed that if he couldn't defeat the humans on the ground, he could at least use his ships to level the battlefield, forcing the desert warriors out into the open. But Tark had already planned for this contingency. As soon as the bombardment began, his warriors retreated to a series of hidden caves and trenches they had prepared in advance. The aliens wasted precious energy and resources on an attack that hit nothing but sand. Once the bombardment ceased, the humans re-emerged, picking off the remaining alien forces with ease. It was a devastating blow to Archer's army, both in terms of morale and actual numbers. What had started as a show of force had turned into a humiliating rout. By the end of the second day, the alien forces were in complete disarray. Their commanders were dead or missing, their communications were in shambles, and their soldiers were scattered across the desert, barely able to stand, let alone fight. Archer, once so confident in his army's superiority, now faced the grim reality of total defeat. His troops had been outmatched not by superior technology or firepower, but by the simple, unyielding reality of the desert, and the warriors who had mastered it. Tark, observing from a distance, knew that the battle was all but over. The alien forces, for all their bluster, had been broken. But there was still work to be done. His warriors moved silently through the night, gathering intelligence, confirming the alien losses, and preparing for the final phase of their strategy. The desert had proven to be their greatest ally, as he had always known it would be. Now, it was only a matter of time before General Archer would be forced to acknowledge the undeniable truth. The humans, whom he had so arrogantly dismissed, had won. As the third day dawned, the desert was eerily quiet. The alien forces, now a shadow of their former selves, were scattered across the barren landscape, struggling to find any semblance of order. Their once mighty army had been reduced to small, disjointed units, desperately clinging to survival. The heat, once an annoyance, had become their worst enemy. With their supplies nearly depleted and their technology failing at every turn, the aliens had been forced into a position they had never anticipated, fighting not just for victory, but for their lives. General Archer, watching from his command center, knew the end was near. His forces were barely holding together, and morale had hit rock bottom. The desert, which he had once thought to be nothing more than an obstacle, had become an insurmountable challenge. His troops were no longer warriors. They were broken, beaten down by the relentless heat, the shifting sands, and the constant ambushes by an enemy they couldn't catch. Desperation had taken hold. Archer's advisors, once confident and eager to follow him into battle, now whispered among themselves, questioning whether continuing the fight was even possible. Some suggested retreat, while others argued for a final, all-out attack, hoping to salvage what little dignity remained. But Archer knew that any attempt to push forward would only result in further losses. The humans had them surrounded, both physically and psychologically. Every move he made was anticipated, every strategy countered. The humans were in control, and there was little he could do to change that. Tark, observing the alien forces from a distance, understood the situation perfectly. He could see the fear in their movements, the hesitation in their actions. His warriors had been relentless in their strikes, never giving the aliens a moment to regroup or strategize. And now, it was time to move into the final phase of the plan. The aliens were on the brink of collapse, and all it would take was one last push to finish them off completely. He gathered his officers, outlining the final assault with precision. This was not to be a reckless charge, it was to be a coordinated, calculated effort to dismantle what was left of the alien army. Every movement was planned, every attack timed to perfection. The goal was not just to defeat the aliens, but to break them completely, leaving no room for them to recover. This was the culmination of everything they had worked for. As the day wore on, the desert warriors executed their plan with brutal efficiency. Small, agile teams struck from the flanks, targeting key positions and cutting off what little supply lines remained. The alien soldiers, already exhausted and demoralized, were caught completely off guard. They tried to fight back, but their movements were sluggish, their responses slow. The desert had taken its toll, sapping their strength and their will to fight. Every time they thought they had a moment to breathe, another attack would come, swift and devastating. Panic spread like wildfire. Alien commanders, unable to maintain communication with their scattered forces, gave orders that were either ignored or misunderstood. The once coordinated alien army had devolved into chaos, with soldiers abandoning their posts, fleeing into the desert in a desperate attempt to escape the inevitable. But there was no escape. The desert stretched on for miles in every direction, and the humans knew it far better than they did. The more the aliens tried to run, the more they fell into the humans' traps, becoming easy targets for the desert warriors who seemed to be everywhere at once. Archer, watching helplessly, could no longer deny the truth. His army was finished. There would be no glorious victory, no triumphant return to the Galactic Council. The humans had outsmarted him at every turn, using the desert to their advantage in ways he had never imagined. It wasn't just that they were better prepared for the conditions, they had used the very nature of the terrain as a weapon, something his forces had never even considered. The arrogance that had once fueled his confidence now tasted bitter in his mouth. But there was one final card to play. Archer, desperate and unwilling to accept total defeat, issued a direct challenge to the human leader. It was a tradition among his people to settle matters with a one-on-one duel in cases of ultimate dishonor. If Tark accepted, it would be a fight to the death, a final attempt to salvage some semblance of pride. Archer hoped that, despite everything, his combat skills would at least allow him to leave this battle with his dignity intact. Tark received the message and considered it carefully. His first instinct was to refuse. After all, the battle was already won, and there was no need to risk anything further. But he also understood the importance of sending a message, not just to the aliens, but to the Galactic Council and the rest of the galaxy. By accepting Archer's challenge, he would demonstrate that Earth's warriors were not just survivors, they were conquerors. It would solidify humanity's place as a force to be reckoned with, capable of matching even the most fearsome alien warriors on their own terms. The duel took place at dusk, the desert sky glowing red with the fading light of the sun. Archer, still clad in his now scorched armor, faced Tark, who wore the simple, practical gear of a desert warrior. There were no speeches, no grand declarations, just two warriors facing each other in the sands. The duel was brief but brutal, a testament to the raw skill and determination of both combatants. But in the end, it was Tark who stood victorious, his blade at Archer's throat. For a moment, there was silence. Archer, breathing heavily, met Tarek's gaze. There was no anger, no hatred, only the quiet understanding that he had been bested. With a nod of respect, Tark withdrew his blade, sparing Archer's life. The message had been sent. Earth's warriors had not only survived, they had thrived, proving themselves against an enemy who had thought them weak. As Archer's remaining forces retreated into the night, broken but alive, Tark turned to his warriors. The battle was over. The desert, once thought to be Earth's greatest weakness, had become its greatest strength. And now, the galaxy would know it too. The dust had finally settled, and the once proud army of General Archer had been reduced to a few scattered survivors limping away into the desert. The remnants of their forces, battered and defeated, would carry the memory of this battle for the rest of their lives. What began as a mere exercise to crush a supposedly primitive enemy had turned into a nightmarish lesson in the harsh reality of underestimating humanity. Earth's warriors, forged by centuries of survival and some of the harshest conditions known, had not just defended themselves, they had triumphed against one of the galaxy's most advanced militaries. Tark stood at the edge of the battlefield, surveying the aftermath. His desert warriors, as disciplined and efficient as ever, moved through the dunes, ensuring that the alien forces had truly been vanquished. There was no celebration, no outward sign of victory. For them, this was just another day in the desert, another battle and a lifetime of fighting. They had long since learned that victory was not something to be celebrated too loudly, especially in a place as unforgiving as the desert. Here, survival was victory enough. The Galactic Council had been watching from a distance, their disbelief growing with each passing hour of the battle. They had expected Earth to be crushed swiftly and decisively, and now they found themselves grappling with the reality that they had been wrong. The human forces had not only proven themselves, they had demonstrated a level of strategic genius and resilience that far surpassed anything the Council had anticipated. The power dynamics in the galaxy had shifted, and it was clear that Earth would no longer be viewed as a backwater world with outdated technology and irrelevant tactics. Word of the battle spread quickly, reaching every corner of the galaxy. The story of the desert warriors, humans who had used the land itself as a weapon, became a topic of discussion in every major galactic power. Armies that had once mocked Earth's military capabilities now found themselves rethinking their strategies. There were whispers among the alien races about what other secrets Earth might be hiding, what other environments had shaped their warriors. If they could dominate in the desert, what could they do in the mountains, the jungles, or even the frozen wastelands of their world? General Archer's defeat was not just a personal failure, it was a symbol of the arrogance that had blinded so many alien races to the potential of humanity. As his forces limped away, he was forced to face the reality of his situation. His reputation, once built on strength and unrelenting victory, had been shattered. He would return to his people not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale. A tale of what happens when you underestimate an opponent simply because they do not fight the way you do. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. Humanity fought differently because they had to. They didn't have the luxury of relying on technology to solve every problem or advanced armor to protect them from every threat. They relied on their wits, their instincts, and their ability to adapt to any situation. For the Galactic Council, the implications of the battle were profound. They had long governed under the assumption that the strongest were those with the most advanced technology and the largest armies. But now, Earth had shown that there was another way to win, one that didn't rely on brute force or overwhelming firepower, but on intelligence, strategy, and resilience. The Council, once dismissive of Earth, now found themselves considering the possibilities. What could humanity achieve with proper support, with the resources and technology that the other races took for granted? Could Earth become a major player in the galaxy? These questions, once laughable, were now very real. And while the galaxy pondered them, Earth's desert warriors returned to the shadows, ready to fade into the background once more. They had no need for fame or recognition. Their purpose had always been clear: protect their world, survive, and win. They had done that, and now they would wait for the next challenge, knowing that it would come eventually. Tark, ever the strategist, knew that this victory was just the beginning. The galaxy now had its eyes on Earth, and with that attention would come new challenges. There would be those who sought to test humanity's strength again, perhaps believing that this victory had been a fluke, a result of the unique circumstances of the desert. But Tark knew better. He and his warriors had fought in every corner of Earth, in every condition imaginable. There was no terrain they couldn't master, no environment they couldn't turn to their advantage. And when the time came, they would be ready, just as they had been this time. For now, though, there was a calm in the air, a rare moment of peace. Tark allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, knowing that his people had proven themselves in the most definitive way possible. The message had been sent: humanity was not to be underestimated, not in the desert, not anywhere. They had fought, they had adapted, and they had won. And as long as there were battles to be fought, humanity would always rise to the occasion, no matter the odds, no matter the enemy. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. The winds had died down, and the temperature began to drop. The sands, once filled with the chaos of battle, were now silent. The desert, ever eternal, had witnessed yet another victory, and like the countless battles before, it would erase the traces of this one as well. But for the aliens who had fought here, for the galaxy that had watched from afar, the memory of this battle would linger long after the last grain of sand had shifted. The desert warriors disappeared into the dunes, leaving nothing behind but the knowledge that they were out there, waiting, ready for whatever came next.